Thank you guys very much for coming. So you are here for lawn sustainability and water conservation. Try not to say that too many times. Come on, whoops. Okay, so what it's really about is healthy soils equal healthy lawns. And that's soils or soil condition drives what sort of vegetation can grow at the surface. This is, my son was helping me take a soil sample. This is the soil sample out of my yard. This is what we want to see, very black. We don't want to see brown or tan, because then it's telling us it doesn't have any organic matter. And that's what really drives most of soil health. So I will talk to you guys about taking soil samples, how to send those in. You can do a visual guide, and I've got some, we'll have some visual guides in here, but it's ideal to take a soil sample, send it in to a soil lab, like at the University of Minnesota soil testing lab. It's $17 to send a soil test in, but then you get back really specific results for your yard, for soil content being one of those that are key. So my name is Greg Thompson. I'm a Bloomington resident. I've lived in Bloomington for 18 years. During my day job now for the last about 10 years, I've worked at the city of Eagan in stormwater, water quality, protecting surface water bodies. Before that, I worked for the soil and water conservation districts in the Twin Cities area, so the 7 metro counties. Did that for about 10 years. And then before that, I was in the private sector in landscape architecture, natural resource management consulting company in South Dakota. I'm a South Dakota native. I grew up on a farm out by the Mitchell area. I went to South Dakota State University, their landscape architecture program there, graduated 24 years ago now. But my whole life has been involved with soil, plants, and water. And I love it. But anyway, so that's what I get to do for my day job still. So I want to just mention, we have a free Water Smart Landscaping class that's more comprehensive in nature. This is going to cover some of it, but some of the lawn information here. But we have more of an expanded class that's on April 4th, Wednesday, 6 to 7:30 at the Penn Lake Library in the meeting room there. You can reserve a seat. It's a free class. Reserve a seat at bushlakeikes.org. We're going to be covering lawns and soils, so part of what we're covering today, but also including some information on rain gardens, rainwater harvesting, and plant selection. So picking the right plant for the right place, picking a plant or a group of plants that are appropriate for your yard conditions. Like I got heavy shade, I've got a big linden tree with big leaves, and nothing grows underneath it. There's a whole bunch of stuff that will grow underneath it, but we can sort of help guide you on that. So Minnesota, rainfall and snowfall, or annual precipitation. So Twin Cities area in here, so we're sitting right here on the southern edge of Bloomington, or southern edge of Hennepin County. We get on average in the Twin Cities 32 inches of annual precipitation. Where I grew up in South Dakota, we were about at 14 inches of annual precipitation. We always thought, we had relatives that lived here, we'd come and visit, like Minneapolis is like a tropical rainforest compared to where we were from. And then when I moved here in '94 and then worked in a residential landscape design build company, and I just remember talking to people like, oh, it's so dry here, it's so dry here, we never get any rain. It's like, for where I was from, seemed like rain all the time. But if you went 2 weeks without some rainfall, then that seemed like a big drought here, but not where I was from. There's soil conditions, so these precipitation maps, soil maps, vegetation maps, they all sort of line up together, these different types. The plants that were there were driven by the annual precipitation rates and the soil conditions that were there, or the main soil groups. So like these brown soils developed underneath prairie plants. The green soils developed underneath deciduous forests. Then you had black, that was peat deposits. The soil is a big driver of what grows at the surface, as well as then precipitation. This is a map of the pre-European settlement native plant communities. So the plant communities like prairie, oak savanna, woodlands, deciduous woodlands, or maple basswood forest is another name for that. the northern coniferous forest where those plant communities generally existed prior to European settlement. So in the Twin Cities, so Bloomington right in here, we were really oak savanna, so scattered oak trees, bur oaks typically, and then the yellow, that was prairie, tall grass prairie areas. Just to the west of us was the green, the maple basswood forest, or the big woods. Also, that's sort of wrapped into Dakota County a little bit. And then you get, see up here, but there's this band of where the prairie was, and then there's, it'd have some creeping up into here, but that was because of soil types. And then your deciduous woods, or the savanna was sort of the merge in between prairie and a woodland, sort of, and then the northern coniferous forest areas. So this sort of helps guide us too on how not to try to force some plant to grow in a condition that it doesn't want to be growing in that state. It's just not maybe appropriate. The reason that a lot of those plants were growing here, they just developed deep root systems or just developed to exist in the climate conditions that we were getting. So a lot of deep roots, these are in 1 foot increments over here. So this is an 18-inch or 24-inch tall prairie plant called lead plant. We had it growing in our pastures out in South Dakota. 18, 24 inches tall, 15-foot deep root system. So we go into a little bit of a drought period, even for a month or 2 months. It doesn't know it, because it's getting moisture and nutrients so far down. As compared to Kentucky bluegrass, which is from Europe. It got brought into the United States. It was hybridized a lot in Kentucky, but Kentucky gets way more rainfall than we get in Minnesota, way more. And where Kentucky bluegrass originally comes from in Europe, it gets 4 times as much annual rainfall as we get in Minnesota. It grows here if it gets a lot of rain or if it's watered a lot, if it gets a lot of supplemental watering. It is never going to be able to develop a deep root system. It's just that's not what that plant is. It can only have a 2 to 3 inch deep root system. That's where it maxes out. So we go into 2 weeks of no rainfall here. It's getting stressed out. You screw up the soil underneath it or the soil that it's planted in, it's even worse. It shortens its stress period of when it starts exhibiting stress. But like out in South Dakota on our pastures, we'd have this plant called buffalo grass, which doesn't grow here, it's too wet, but it would be 6 inches tall, but it's got a 7-foot deep root system. We just find this big patch of it. So out in South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, there are people that are converting their lawns into this buffalo grass because it's just much more appropriate plant species out there. So when you develop sites, you replace that spongy topsoil that had the black organic matter in it, that's gone, that's scraped off. You've exposed sands or clays, because that's our main 2 mineral soil groups. So you expose those, it gets compacted because of all the construction equipment, and then topsoil, air quotes, topsoil would get dumped back on it. And I was a landscape contractor, and what we would get whatever, that sort of looked darkish and dump it on there. No one's checking what the depth is of what you're putting it on there. You would just put it on so something looked like it was there. They often specify it's 4 inches or 6 inches. That, in my experience, never happened. And my follow-up experience, I've never seen that. But so you put rough soils, you'd bring more clays and sands in with a little bit of darkness. It had a little bit of organic matter, and you're dumping that on top of more compacted mineral soils. And plants really need organic matter. They need the stuff that was there before, and then you compact it, so it's even worse. But in natural soils, they naturally have about 5% soil organic content, 5 to 8%. And then you have mineral soils, so sands or clays. You have air space, air pockets, and then moisture that's within there. You compact it and you squish it down. You've stripped off the topsoil, so now they strip off the organic matter. So now your organic is maybe 2%. Oftentimes we see between 1 to 2%. And then you've squished down your air pockets that were in there, the water that's able to be in those air pockets, and then you just have mostly mineral soil, which plants don't really need that much, and it's so compacted it makes it really hard for roots to grow down there. So what happens then, because we've done that, we've screwed up the growing environment for these plants. They can't get roots down deep into the soil. It's too compacted. They don't have any nutrients in there or organic matter that helps the plants. We end up dumping a lot of water from irrigation onto lawns and landscapes to keep them alive. So on an average residential situation, out of your water use, average, 44% of the water use is for indoor, 56% for outdoor. We should not have this much being used outdoors, especially like in a city. It's treated drinking water. It's deep aquifer water. It's being treated to make it safe for drinking, and we're just dumping tons of it, millions of gallons, billions of gallons on lawns to keep them alive. Wrong plant, horrible growing conditions. Just a little side note I want to show on the indoor, the 44% of your water usage average of indoor, where that goes to. Toilet flushing is a big one. Clothes washing, faucets, showers, and bath. This one's easy to fix. We do have a handout. So I'm with also in my volunteer capacity, I'm with the Izaak Walton League with the Bush Lake chapter. We have a booth down in the sustainability area, it's called, down at the far south end of the complex here, that we have handouts of ways to save water outside and in the house. But what happens then? So during the non-growing season, this is within Bloomington on average, how much water is getting pumped out, treated, and sent out into the system for drinking water, into the drinking water pipes. On average, 300 million gallons of water per month. So this was from 2006. It's crept up, but so here's your baseline, it's called. This is what people are using indoors. Then you get to the outdoor watering season, and then boom, then it jumps up to, here's 800 million gallons of water per month. So for watering lawns, swimming pools are in there too, but a lot of it's lawns. So then where that comes from, the city buys some water from the city of Minneapolis that is using treated Mississippi River drinking water. So that's sort of expensive. They're pulling water out of deep aquifers that are between about 400 and 1,000 feet below the surface. Great water, but it takes a long time for any replacement water to get back down there. So we're pulling this out at a faster rate than it's replenishing. Bloomington's sort of sitting in a good spot just geologically, that it's crazy what's happening way down deep subsurface. So they're not experiencing or predicted to experience the issues like other cities. And I'll show a couple slides on that. But something I encourage people to do, try to find out how much water you use. Really look at your water bill and look at some specific numbers. Sorry, I picked the wrong text color here, but you should look at your usage amount and your use and your date range. And so here's off of my water bill. So as an example, here's my use or my reading dates. And I wish they would put in this is how many days it is, just to be able to calculate that quicker. So I use a little app to figure that out, 61 days. And then here's my usage amount. So 5,059 gallons divided by 61 days. I'm using 82.9 gallons per day. My family, that's my wintertime use. My summertime use, 80.8 gallons per day. I have usually no outdoor water use. I got young kids. We'll do little swimming pool stuff outside, but Dad gets a little cranky if they don't cover the little swimming pool, and then they get a bunch of stuff in it, we got to dump that and put fresh water, and again, cover it with the tarp. So my 4-person water use. So the average, this is the national sort of average. 4-person household uses 160 to 240 gallons per day. So my household, and I've got 2 kids, they're clean. We take showers and stuff. We wash clothes. I'm not washing my clothes in the creek. We use 20 gallons per day, roughly. And I'm not doing any crazy measures, but when I first moved into the house, first thing I did was replace my toilets, because that's the biggest water user in the house. I had 5 gallon per flush, super old toilets. And they have 1.28 gallons per flush toilets that are awesome. So replace that, and I really took a dive. However, I'm going to then show you there's cool stuff on the city website, or on the city, it's called the Bloomington Customer Web. If you pay your utility bill online, you can get customer timeline usage summaries. And so you show, give me my records, how much I've used. So here's my crazy spikes, that just went out of the norm. Boom, big one there, and a big one here. This is embarrassing because I'm just, okay, well, not the baby clothes thing, but baby number 1 showed up. We were doing a lot of clothes washing, a lot of, 4 outfits a day, just throwing up on stuff all the time. Baby number 2 comes up, same deal, a lot of clothes washing, big bump. I did seed my lawn in the fall of 2012, and that's where I did a lot of lawn watering there. Popped up, but it was a one-time deal. Then over here, my fault, I planted some shrubs. I'm playing with the kids outside. I'm like, I'm going to turn the hose on over here, and then we'll go play. And then we went in for the night, and I forgot to turn the hose off, and I skipped the next day, and I didn't hear it running in my house, And so it was like 2 days later, I went outside and walked through my lawn, and it was goosh, goosh, goosh. And I'm on sand. It drains out super fast. And I felt horrible. But it was nearly 11,000 gallons of water that I dumped on that month because I blew it. Not going to do it again. There's a little automated thing that you can put on if you water like that, you can get a little timer. It's like $10 to put on, say water for 30 minutes and shut off. And I should have done that. And I had one in my garage, I just didn't use it. But anyway, but we don't live crazy. So graded and compacted soils, topsoil strip, compacted subsoils. You have, and I used to be a landscape contractor, and this is what we would do to people's yards, and then we would roll sod out on top of this. We would be the last contractor on new construction sites. Sometimes we're doing landscape renovations of existing homes, and we're running our wheeled skid loaders. Everyone's using wheeled back then. Now there's tracked equipment, so that spreads the weight out. It doesn't compact as much, but it still compacts pretty good. But wheeled equipment especially, that's putting like a skid loader, 10,000 pounds, putting all of that weight underneath 4 points. You couldn't do a better job of compacting, and especially if it's wet and you're running out there and it's just horrible. So you put sod on it. We call that green concrete because it can't absorb much for water, and it's almost like a parking lot out there that it's just running off. So highly compacted soil, unable to absorb rainfall. But as we add more impervious surfaces where water can't soak into the ground, whether it's parking lots, driveways, or super compacted lawns, we keep increasing this runoff number and keep decreasing the deep infiltration that goes to feed our aquifers or recharge our aquifers, and decrease the shallow infiltration, which is like what goes down shallow groundwater and then goes into like 9 Mile Creek here, it pops up there to keep base flow sort of up. Now the creek is just really flashy. It'll go really low, and then we get a rain event and then pops up. But anyway, so we put turf grass on life support system to keep it alive because it can't get roots in. It's got horrible growing conditions underneath it. It needs water to just to grow. And then fertilization, it gets onto that. Groundwater pumping where there are issues. You guys heard like up in White Bear Lake, the lake really dropped, and that's from pumping, just excessive pumping, and a lot of that need is for lawn irrigation. Okay, so what we promote is water smart landscaping, building healthy soil, number 1, using water wisely and selecting proper plants. So for a healthy lawn, deeper roots equal less irrigation needs. So we need roots to go down as deep as possible. Raising the mow height to 3 inches encourages deeper rooting. If you're mowing it short, like 1.5 inches, it can only support an 1.5 inch deep root system. So on Kentucky bluegrass, the top height is directly correlated to the bottom root depth. If you're mowing it at 3 inches, if your mower can go that high, or potentially 4 inches, then you can get a deeper root system, makes it more drought tolerant, reduces moisture loss too, with the more roots that it can have accessing moisture. Don't mow during droughts. Once we stop getting rainfalls, you can stop mowing because your lawn is going to stop growing, for the most part. Every time you mow it, when it's dry, it stresses it out, and it makes it creates more area, more surface area where it's losing water out of it. It's just wicking it out in a water vapor, and then it starts wilting, and then you start watering it, and it's people just wanting to just continuously mow, of like, I mow every Thursday, and this is what I do, and so don't have to do that. Using a very sharp mulching blade. That's very important. It's a good idea to have 2 blades. So you always have one on hand, one ready to go that's just sharpened up, and then keep checking those. Because if you're using a dull blade, if you can run your finger on that blade very carefully, but if it does not feel sharp, it feels blunt, it's tearing the grass. And that creates more surface area where it can lose water. If you're cutting with a sharp blade, it makes a pretty clean cut, less surface area on those leaf blade tips. It also, a mulching blade finely chops the grass blades. You don't have to bag. There's no need for bagging anymore. You're removing free organic matter from your lawn. You use a mulching blade, because some people go, oh, it just is too much crap that gets left, on the surface of the lawn with their blade. Go to a mulching blade, maybe drive a little bit slower, so it gives it time to really chop those up into fine pieces, and that will make its way down within the turf grass, down to the soil, and turn it into organic matter. Cleaner cut, less moisture loss. Don't mow during droughts. Time your mowing to predicted rain events. We've got all this great local weather information now. You can go on a website, Weather Underground, wonderground.com, and then find a weather station near your house. There's probably 20 or 30 of them across Bloomington that people have set up that are reliable weather stations that then you can find your weather forecasts and also how much precipitation we just got. But look at those weather forecasts, because Weather Underground, their predictions are real close. They also predict amounts. And so you want to, if you're looking at like this weekend, well, chance of thunderstorm, 0.36 inches, 0.4, 0.2, that's a good amount of water. You mow before that, because then your lawn's going to get watered. It's not going to stress it out, because every time you mow it, it stresses it out. You mow it here and then it gets water. It's going to be a pretty decent growing condition for it, and remove need for irrigation of it if you did that later. So mow before the rain. Don't mow during or before droughts. This is my yard. So I slit seed it in 2013. So that was my big water bill thing or my big water usage spike in the fall. So I had my yard was sort of struggling. It was Kentucky bluegrass. And I hired a guy, a contractor that had a slit seeder. So in the fall, I bought the seed. I bought, it's called a fine fescue seed mix from a company called prairienursery.com that they shipped for free. I got that seed mix. I gave it to him because he's like, no, I got a seed mix. I've worked enough in landscape industry I know how all that stuff goes. People are getting cheap seed mixes and stuff. Or I'm just picky about it, right? So I gave him the seed mix. This is what I want. So he slit seed that in. So what that does is, rather than overseeding it, because say you scatter seed onto a lawn, most of that seed's going to get hung up and just dry out and die. It'll be bird seed. You need the seed to contact soil to be able to germinate. So these slit seeders, it just has a bunch of little blades all across this little device, self-propelled device, cuts through the soil, drops the seeds in that. And so it takes a little while, but my lawn has converted from a Kentucky bluegrass lawn into a fine fescue lawn that has a deeper root system. I've got really sandy soils and shady, but it does well in sun too. But it has converted. Now, I don't fertilize my yard. Especially, if any of you fertilize, and the U of M still, suggests fall fertilization of some nitrogen, 1 pound, per 1,000 square feet or something like that. No, the U of M does not recommend spring fertilization or summer fertilization. It's only fall, because that drives root growth. If you fertilize in the spring, if you fertilize in the summer, that fertilizes for top growth. That is going to make you mow more often. That is going to use more resources to make up for that plant to then, it needs more water, to do that. And so by fertilizing in the spring and in the summer, multiple fertilizer applications, you're making much more work for yourself. What happens in my lawn, it's not super bright green like my neighbors who fertilize the heck out of their lawns in the spring. That doesn't bother me. I've dealt with it. I've accepted it. I'm not in a race. My race is to get get my outdoor water usage down. So I'm a nerd, I'm a scientist sort, so I track things. I have a little clipboard in my yard just to remind myself when was the last time that I mowed. So this is we got to a dry period. 2 months before the end of June, I stopped mowing my yard because I wanted to get to a certain height before I mow it. I don't fertilize it, so I'm not forcing it, artificially into growth. And so that was it, 8 weeks without mowing. This was then at 12 weeks without mowing. My son's sitting in it, the top of his knee is like at 4 inches. It's not a weedy jungle. It takes out, the more shade canopy you have with turf grass, the more competition that provides for like shading out dandelions, things like that. You could make a better growing environment for dandelions than if you mowed short and then fertilization, and if you had compacted soils, because dandelions love those conditions. They thrive in those conditions. Watch the rain gauge. Really try to know how much rain we got. I put a big rain gauge out in my front yard to so my neighbors could see when they walked by of like how much rain they got. Because we had these huge rains. This is now a few years ago, May, June, we had just a ton of rain, like 3 times more than normal. And I had a neighbor who was then out watering right after we got like a 2-inch rainfall, and that's what he did. That's his schedule, and he didn't need to do that. But anyway, I grew up on a farm, and everything was about how much rain did we get, the night before, or how much, So I've just always had rain gauges around. You can get off the Weather Underground. You don't have to have your own rain gauge. There's that great information that you can pull off of these local weather stations, these free publicly accessible weather stations. You can also run weather reports or tell you how much rain have we got in the last week or month. You can set this up, and then it says 18.21 inches. I'm again a weather nerd, so I do that kind of stuff. Testing for soil compaction. Use a straight wire flag, like this utility locate flag, to check your yard. So once soil's thawed out, we don't want the soil to be moist, not really wet, and not really bone dry. And you take this flag out and go to multiple points in your yard and see how far down you can push it. You want to hold the wire down at the bottom, keep it nice and sturdy as you're pushing in, because if you start at the top, it'll bend it, and then it won't go in as easy. But push this down. You should be able to sink this all the way down. If you get it to 1 inch or 2 inch, then in multiple spots, you're not hitting a rock or a root or something, then you should be looking at core plug aeration. If you're getting it to 3 inches plus, then core plug aeration is not going to make a difference, because that's what it's supposed to deal with, the compaction. So how deep can you push it into the ground? How much resistance is it? Is the soil hard, rocky, soft, grainy? You can feel all of that through this wire. I've used these wires a lot, but I can feel like, oh yeah, there's a sand layer, I can feel it, because it goes right through the wire. Or it's just really soft, and it's clay. So there's the core plug aerator, pops out plugs, goes about max 3 inches. Oftentimes, if you're paying someone to aerate your lawn and they do it during a dry period, oftentimes they can't even punch in. You'll find these plugs that are maybe 1 inch long, and there you wasted a lot of money there. You want to, sometimes if it's been dry, that is also when I did water that big spike. I watered right before that guy showed up with the aerator and the slit seeder, because it had been dry. I wanted the lawn to be sort of moist so he could punch in a little bit further. But best time to aerate's fall. You aerate in the spring, then you open up soil for seed germination. So dandelions and stuff blowing around, other seeds blowing around, you've made more growing conditions for them. So fall, there's less seeds blowing around, good time to do it. It's also a good time to top dress with compost and tend to overseed at that point. Remember, if you're doing aeration, pre-locate and flag any shallow buried wires or irrigation heads, because this will punch right through those. Cable and telephone are usually buried the shallowest. So it's good to know where that stuff is. So there's our core plug aerator. The hardware stores around have those for rent. We do, at our booth downstairs, I have a list of, I have a number of sheets down there with different information. Hardware stores that have the aerators. I have sources of like the compost that I'll talk about in a little bit. I have sources of everything. This is what, like in the city of Egan, what they use. This is a Toro brand deep core aerator that can go 8 to 16 inches down. This is what some cities use in parks to deal with compaction further down. You don't want to take this probably through your yard. Soil sampling. So that's using, we've got an example of a core extractor down there that we can sort of loan out to people. But usually to do a soil sample, you can use a trowel, or you can get a little earth auger, they're called. They're about $5-6 for a little auger that goes into a cordless drill that you can do soil samples with. But pull out a sample. In this case, it's sand. I mean, here was their turf grass roots, and then it's just all sand. We're looking for black. How much black is in here, because that's the organic matter content. That's what we want. This is a very well-drained yard, but they need a little bit more organics. So again, testing, this is what we want to see, this black here. So this is then taking the soil sample. We take the core, we take the top about 4 inches, pull that out, drop it in a bag, break it up, take a number of samples in a front yard. So I'm getting ready in this case to send this into the university soil testing lab. They want a 4-digit code for each sample you send in. So I say front yard, this is my second sample in the front yard. I'll do BY for backyard. These are some augers that I have. They're pretty heavy duty ones, but I can drill down 24 or 30 inches with these and pull out soil samples and just see how it changes. But this is then how we have soil sample submittal forms down in our booth as well. So this is from the University of Minnesota. This is where they recommend, how they recommend taking samples, where to take the samples, or where you can ship them. They charge $17 per sample. They want you to fill out this form for each sample you submit. So 1 sample for front yard, 1 for backyard is a good way to go. They ask, is the grass watered regularly? Are clippings removed? Is this if it's the lawn, is it before seeding, or is it an existing lawn? And you fill in your stuff. They send back a form like this. So I'm looking mainly at this number and at pH. So this is organic matter percent, so soil organic content, 2.5. Down here, the goal for organic content is 5%, 5 to 8%. So we need to take this up. Then we can do some calculations to figure out how much compost we would need to raise that number up. But they have 0 phosphorus fertilizers. Why they did that? People, I need phosphorus, I need phosphorus. If every sample you submit, phosphorus is going to be off the charts. We have way more than we need. That's not the issue. That's driving things. It's organic matter. Yeah. And then pH can sometimes just be so whacked out that it hurts plant growth or desirable plant growth. There's always some plant that can grow in some pretty harsh conditions, but a lot of times it's not the plants that we want there. This was a sample from my yard, so 6.5%. That's that really black stuff. And I really didn't do much to get that. I mulched my leaves, and I'll show that. I think I have a couple slides on that. So this is hard to show up, but that's what good soil should look like, black. This is what it oftentimes is. So this is a visual guide here that, color like this, you're in the 2%. It's hard to pick this up with the light and stuff in here, but this is really our goal up here. So compost, we've got handouts down there with sources of compost in bulk. So this is leaf compost, well-aged leaves and grass clippings, taken to processing sites that do all the processing for the counties, and then they have big storage yards where it's available. One site that's semi-close to here is it's called the Mulch Store. It's down by the landfill in Burnsville off of Cliff Road. You go down to Cliff off of 35 and then just start heading to the west. And they have big piles of it. They also have it in bags. I can't remember what a bag size is, but a truckload, so this is a pickup truckload, this is $20. It's cheap material, it's really light, but then what you do with that, there's some contractors that have power spreaders. They'll show up with a trailer, they'll load up their power spreader and just broadcast it over the top of the lawn. And that starts raising organic matter content. It's just an 1/8 to 1/4 inch layer over the top of the lawn in the fall. It slowly breaks down and goes down through the turf grass and into the soil below. As an example, this is a yard. They have 5,800 square feet of total lawn area. Quarter-inch depth, that would be 4 cubic yards or 4 pickup loads would be enough to do it. $80 in materials. You can also pay these companies to deliver it and dump it on your driveway, and it's typically that it's about $80 for a delivery for that stuff. So you might want to put a tarp on the driveway where they dump it so it doesn't, if you got a concrete driveway, so it doesn't leave a stain on there. But that's one way to do it. This was, I was working with my kids to do, so if you bring it to your yard, you got a pile in your driveway or something, you load it up into wheelbarrow, and then just take it around and make piles in your yard. And then using a rake, just a hard tine rake, flip it over so the hard, the flat scraper part is there, and just drag it out. And so my daughter was helpful, my son was just digging through it looking for worms. But useless. But he's getting better. So this is what it looked like right after spreading. And so that's right after, looking straight down. And then that was it. A week later, it's gone, but it's moved down below the turf grass. You'll see some little clovers in there. I've come to peace with those. Creeping clovers, not a bad thing. Mulching leaves. So I got Norway maple and 2 silver maple and a green ash in my yard. I get a lot of leaf drop. I'm out there. I don't wait for it to really get a thick mat of leaves. I mulch in the fall. I'll run over it with the mower at least every 2 days and just keep it under control. But I don't bag them. I just run over it with really sharp mulching blade. My son likes to help out too, but again, not a lot of help. But using, again, a sharp mulching blade, it finely chops the leaves. You might need to do 2 passes to get the chunks really small. So that is a before and an after, before and an after, looking straight down. We want little pieces. You don't want to smother your grass, but you get it small enough and it's just going to work its way down in between the blades. Lawn alternatives. So ideal grass for Minnesota is this fine fescue. Deeper root system, doesn't grow as fast as Kentucky bluegrass, doesn't need the water that Kentucky bluegrass needs. Deeper root growth is more drought tolerant. Mainly the fine fescues are creeping red fescues. You want to check the mix and make sure it's got creeping red fescues in it. If you go sometimes to like a hardware store and say I want a fescue mix, they'll give you a tall fescue mix, and you don't want that for your lawn to form a turf. A lot of times tall fescues are clump forming and they want to grow taller. Fine fescues, especially the creeping red fescues, are sod forming. They grow out rhizomatously. They help exclude dandelions and other things like that, and it's a nice grass. So again, much deeper root system than Kentucky bluegrass. Kentucky bluegrass is going to be about in here. This is not available as a sod because it's got too deep of a root system. Sod, it's Kentucky bluegrass works ideal as a sod because it never can develop a deep root system. They can go out with the big, at the sod farms, cut it out really easy, and it lives, for a while in the roll. It's just like a chia pet, sort of a thing. Just you could grow on grass on rocks. You can do it. You can grow grass on rocks if you put enough water on it, but that is not suitable for areas where you just need to conserve a little bit more water. So this is what a fine fescue mix looks like looking down on it. It's very fine leaf blades, very hair-like leaves, as compared to Kentucky bluegrass. Is a little bit wider, flat leaf blades. This is, if you never mow it, it's going to get to about 6 inches tall, and it starts to arc over a little bit. But in areas where you're not actively using, I like it. I like the look of it. It's very flowy. But if you mow it, so end of June is a good time, like for your first mowing. And then if you need to, in August and September, if we've got the rains that are driving it. But otherwise, it's just going to stay green and not really grow. It's just going to sort of live. But If you want want your lawn to look more like a regular lawn, then those periodic mowings. But again, every time you mow a turf, you're stressing it out. So you just want to minimize the times that you're mowing. Creeping clovers, not a bad thing. This is part of my lawn looking straight down. This is also borders on the narrow strip with my neighbor who hates it. And he sprays his yard, but he doesn't have kids anymore. You have to use like a 2,4-D to spray to kill a broadleaf. I grew up on a farm and I applied a lot of chemicals. It volatilizes. You can smell it for weeks just coming off of the turf. And I was having kids, I knew they were going to be crawling on the lawn and stuff, and I'm done with that part. We'll pluck out occasionally dandelions out of respect to some of our neighbors. That we'll just use, we've got a decent Fisker's extraction tool that works pretty awesome. But this is what it looks like straight down. But this is what it looks like across it. You can't even see it. The creeping clovers never breach the surface, over the top of the turf. So it's only my neighbor that's right here that knows it's there. Anyone out driving by the street doesn't know. And it stays green and drought. Clovers have really deep roots. I mean, they're really good for soil compaction, remediation.
How high can the grass be before the city breaks you winter?
Most cities raise that now it's in the 7 or 8 inches. Yeah. I can't say for sure on Bloomington. Bloomington might be 6, but I mean in this stuff, you can do that in the backyard or some side areas, but in your main yard area, then it's like a once-a-year mowing though. Then it's a good time. I found out I get gas for my mower in the spring and then just put the stable in it right away because I'm not using much gas. I don't want my gas to go bad. Yarrow lawns are also great for compacted soils, like out by the curb if you have salt damage, from salt spray, from just snow plowing operations or snow ice removal. This can tolerate that really well, working in high salinity soils. Compacted soils, it does well in clays, but this you do have to mow periodically because it's going to try to grow taller, but it's an awesome sod-forming plant. We had this in our yard at the farm. Our house was in what used to be a pasture. It was built in '76, and then we didn't seed anything. We just started mowing stuff. And so my mom was the main mower, and she would drop the mowing blade down all the way, or the deck would be at 1 inch, 1.5. She wanted it to look like a golf course, and she would kill everything. We didn't have an irrigation system. She would mow during July, where haven't had rain for weeks. She'd mow, everything would be dead except for this. And this was so comfortable to walk on. My brother and I would play on it barefoot. It's just like a bunch of tiny little ferns, but super nice little grass. Not grass, super nice little lawn plant. Other tips: avoid mowing during droughts. So like I mentioned, keep the mowing blade sharp, loosen compacted soils. Irrigation, don't water the road. There's all these wonderful things. I have just run out of time. I got to show you these things. Irrigation controllers that are Wi-Fi connected to get weather data. That's the thing now that everybody, if you've got an irrigation system, an automatic irrigation system, please switch out your controllers to a smart unit if it's got access to Wi-Fi. They're relatively inexpensive, so they're about $200, but it knows. It's like those smart thermostats, all these other smart technologies. It knows if rain is coming, it knows if rain has been here, and then it will tweak its programming. It's not going to be consistent because it doesn't need to be. It needs to adapt. But it's really cool stuff. Those are our main things. And then, yes?
I have something to add for leaf mulching. If anybody's interested in keeping beneficial insects or swallowtail butterflies in the yard, mulching the leaves can be really, really detrimental to that because they overwinter in those leaves a lot. So if you're trying to have more of those beneficial insects in your yard, don't mulch them, break them, or leave them for the winter. So.
Thank you.
When do they grow into those leaves? What time of year?
Fall. Yep.
October, September?
Yep. Yep. And then they go over winter till spring and then they can emerge. So something to think about.
Cool.
when you do mulch now, do you still leave your mower up at 3 inch?
Yeah, because I don't want to scalp the lawn. Yeah. The only time
A lot of lawn mowers, if I do that in the spring, get all that mold on the front of the lawn, or on the top.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking for grubs, and there's, if what I've seen within the fine fescue lawns, so you see more mold issues under Kentucky bluegrass lawns than you do under fescues. There's just more root mass there to sort of hold things together. They're just always going to be around unless you're constantly poisoning them, or trapping them.
You mean the mold?
Molds.
Mold.
Oh, mold. I'm sorry. I thought you said moles. Sorry. Last
The
letter.
molds moved out, they came with a little mold.
Yeah. So snow mold.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that often occurs where like a lot of your snow gets piled too. So I'll rake that up a little bit, rake it off a little in the spring. But I get those patches, but by summer I'm not seeing any difference in my lawn. Yes.
Okay, now, for me, I do keep the grass high during the summer, but starting at the Labor Day, I bring it down because I don't want to get problems with the grass from the spring. Am I doing it wrong?
Well, it just depends, how far. You just don't want to stress it. You want to minimize the stress on it. So if you're lowering it maybe right before a rainfall or something.
Well, I lower it, I slowly lower it down. I just don't go from 3 down to 1.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if it stays green, if it's not browning out. What?
I don't water my lawn because I spend like 10, 12 hours because I have to worry about the neighbors. I got the mailbox from the neighbors. I don't want the mail to get wet.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you on that, but it's probably fine.
Well, you can always pick the road.
Yeah, so maybe if you cap it at 2, don't go lower than 2.
So that way it'll keep going through the winter?
Yeah, I think, yeah. As long as we've got some snow cover, some moisture, if we have a completely bare winter,
We had some of those.
that's stressful. All right, thank you very much, folks.